Washington, D.C. A communique arrives with an urgent message. A group of Islamic fundamentalists has hijacked an LNG tanker with the energy of a nuclear weapon and is headed toward a major U.S. city. We are under attack. Innocent lives are at stake. Our way of life is threatened. Yet there are secret warriors who stand between us and terror. These are the terrorist hunters who protect our world without us knowing it. This is their mission. These are their stories. This decorated former U.S. special operative cannot reveal his name or his face. His identity has been protected because of the missions he has been sent on.
I was a Navy SEAL for 6 years. Was a scout sniper and an intelligence specialist. I mean, we have guys, who dedicate their lives and become professional warriors.
In the era that we live in now, your special forces of the United States military are the best that you can find. The best equipped, the best trained, the best supported, and you find the best men there as well.
And the mission these men were about to take on would prove to be one of the most important in the history of the United States.
We found out that we were going to be going against a liquid natural gas tanker ship that had been taken over. There had been some sleepers on board who, once the ship got out to sea and well away, took over command of the ship, and they planned on using it as a weapon.
And who were these people?
They were Islamic radical terrorists. Let's just leave it at that.
Many security experts are convinced that the perfect target for a terrorist attack would be one of these enormous tankers filled with liquefied natural gas, or LNG. Used widely every day for cooking and heating, natural gas can be cooled to liquefied for transport. But just one tanker's full 30 million gallon cargo could unleash a firestorm with 55 times the energy of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
A fully loaded LNG tanker has the same amount of energy stored in it, akin to nuclear weapons. I mean, they could flatten a city with it. We were told that it was headed for a major American port.
And there's only one major American port that sees LNG tankers pass through its waters every week.
When we look at the issue of hazardous cargoes being brought into downtown areas, there's one that overwhelmingly stands out, and that's Boston Harbor, where you could see thousands upon thousands of fatalities, a truly catastrophic incident.
Today, the United States government raised the national threat level from an elevated to high risk of terrorist attack, or as more commonly known, from a yellow code to an orange code.
And when terrorist threats emerge, our special forces are called to duty.
Some people had infiltrated the crew and had some weapons of some sort and had locked up the crew, taken over control.
Should the tanker reach Boston, it would not be the first LNG disaster on U.S. soil. On October 20th, 1944, a tank ruptured at America's first commercial LNG plant in Cleveland. The resulting firestorm leveled more than a square mile of the city. The devastation in Cleveland was caused by only 9,400 gallons of LNG. A tanker holds over 3,200 times that number, over 30 million gallons. With a full cargo of LNG heading toward Boston, a Special Forces task unit is immediately ordered to get the tanker back at all costs.
Irregular units have been formed to combat irregular types of warfare. Generally, a task unit is a combination of individuals with specialized skill sets that come together to form a team. You might have a sniper, a demolition expert, an intelligence specialist. To me, it's the tip of the spear.
The LNG tanker leaves port in North Africa. 2 days out to sea, a sleeper cell of terrorists hidden within the crew hijacks the vessel. Luckily, a Special Forces task unit is conducting training maneuvers aboard a ship in the area. They are able to reach the tanker within 48 hours.
We were doing some exercises, and it just so happened that all of the elements that were pretty much necessary to do something like this happened to be close by.
With the ship more than 3 football fields in length and 12 stories high, the task unit's first challenge will be getting on board such an enormous vessel.
I always used to think of something that somebody told me was the astronaut's prayer. Lord, please don't let me screw this up.
In any scenario where you are going into the unknown, that's where you have to just rely on your training. We're getting ready to be tested. We all feel we're the best, and we're going to show them we're the best.
In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a tanker filled with liquefied natural gas has been overtaken by terrorists who plan to use it as a weapon against Boston Harbor. A Special Forces task unit has been deployed to stop the terrorists before they reach the East Coast. But first, they must board the vessel.
And you get beat up a little bit. It's really dark. You're carrying, upwards of 60, 70 pounds of gear. Your biggest fear, to be perfectly honest with you, isn't even getting caught. It's falling in the water because you're going to sink very quickly.
teams have successfully boarded the vessel, but are still unaware of the size of the force that awaits them, or just what the terrorists are prepared to do with the dangerous LNG cargo.
We didn't know at the time if the ship was rigged or not with explosives. We had to assume that it would be.
The task unit knows that thousands of American lives are at stake, a concern shared by counterterrorism official Richard Clark, whose first action during the 9/11 attacks was to shut down Boston Harbor. Government intelligence revealed that Al-Qaeda had even smuggled terrorists into the U.S. aboard the massive tankers. After 9/11, the government commissioned a report that predicted breaching only 3 of a tanker's 5 tanks could cause a fire exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, reaching a radius of 2,000 feet.
You would see absolute, total, utter destruction. On 9/11, we know that the heat of the fire from the jet fuel was what weakened the strength of the steel structure that supported the World Trade Center. Those fires burned at about 1,500 degrees. This fire is going to burn at twice that. Buildings, bridges could collapse, and anybody inside that range would almost certainly be killed.
And what we've learned from the studies of the worst case of an LNG tanker spill is that you cannot put out the fire. You cannot evacuate people. It isn't as though it's something you can prepare for.
But it's not just the flames of an LNG fire that will render destruction. Those flames would unleash a wave of radiant heat almost 1.5 miles away from the center of the fire. Enough heat to set wooden buildings ablaze.
If we were to have a release of the full 30 million gallon cargo on board one of these ships, it would just be a tremendous, tremendous volume of fire. Should it ignite, obviously we hope we never have to deal with an incident involving the LNG. We just don't have the resources in any of our cities around here to handle something like that.
In fact, in their book based on a Pentagon report, physicists Amory and Hunter Lovins estimate an attack on an LNG tanker could be equal to 55 times the amount of energy released in the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. To defend against such a catastrophe, when LNG tankers enter U.S. waters just outside Boston Harbor, they're escorted in by a flotilla of heavily armed U.S. Coast Guard gunboats.
In the case of LNG tankers, it is probably the most protected equipment anywhere on Earth.
What the Coast Guard cannot protect against, however, is what happens outside U.S. waters and who the crews of those tankers are.
The threat of a hijacking of the vessel is somewhat of a legitimate concern. We have a lot of natural gas coming now from Algeria. Do they know who their crews are? Are they making sure that they don't have any malicious insiders, anybody with ill will who is not on the crew because they want to make a living wage, but is on the crew because they want to do harm to the United States?
Once the LNG tanker leaves North Africa, a sleeper cell of terrorists posing as crew hijacks the vessel and sets course for Boston Harbor. After a distress call is received, the Special Forces Task Unit is on board within 48 hours in order to take the tanker back.
The initial plan is to get to the bridge as fast as you can. When you get into a ship, there's important places and there's not important places. If you control the bridge and you control the engineering spaces, you control the ship.
To ensure success, the task unit's Alpha team must take control of the bridge at precisely the same time Bravo team secures the engineering compartment.
Part of the challenge to securing 2 rooms at once is you've automatically cut your unit in half. So that means half of your guns going one way, half going another.
You have 2 choices. You can go in hard, fast, and furious, or you can try and be very stealthy. There's a lot of danger there. If it's already rigged, somebody could set something off right away, and then you're already in your worst case scenario. So the decision was made to go in very stealthily.
The Islamic fundamentalists have been in control of the boat for over 2 full days by the time the teams are on board and head to their assigned targets.
There's a harmony to it. Each man's going through the same thing. That's the prevailing element, the thought process to succeed, to overcome, to do what we need to do. What we need to do right now is be secret and be stealthy. Once you hit the deck of the ship, then you're faced with all the unknowns that you can imagine. You don't know what you're going to encounter.
You're hunting, you're focused, you're looking for a target, you want to reach your objectives.
A Special Forces task unit prepares to confront an unknown terrorist force aboard a hijacked liquefied natural gas tanker that is heading for Boston Harbor. The task unit's Alpha team is in place at the bridge.
Every time you come to a closed door in a hostile area, the thought goes through your mind that what's on the other side.
Several decks below, Bravo team makes its way toward the engineering compartment.
On most ships, you can actually maneuver the ship from the engineering spaces. That's why you have to get a hold of those. We had to assume that if we were compromised in any way, that somebody might try to just detonate or set a fire. So we had to be conscious of that. Obviously, in a ship, some of the tactics that you would use in other places, you can't use. You don't throw grenades in engineering spaces on ships. Bad idea.
Entering an engine room, as you can see, various levels above you, various levels below you, catwalks, boilers, different things for someone to hide behind. Your training gets tested at this spot because of all the variables. Who goes up, who goes down. That could be a potentially hazardous nightmare scenario. Sometimes you may hear an enemy before you see an enemy. So your ears have to be just as in tune as your eyes are.
The real crux of the whole op is when you're stacking right outside the door of the bridge, it's time to go in and actually make contact with people. That's where that decision of life or death comes along.
And you stack on that door. Everybody's thinking the same thing. Is this going to be where the bad guys are? Sometimes you can have a full conversation in the eyes.
On an LNG tanker in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a task unit prepares to retake control from terrorists who plan to incinerate Boston Harbor. 2 teams are in place to secure the bridge and engine room simultaneously.
On my mark.
والله يا عسام كنت جاء حول اسمه لا محمد هو طلب لا ما صح.
That's where that decision of life or death comes along. You know, when you take the door, do they freeze? Do they do something rash? Do they reach for a gun? Do they go obey commands? That's the worst part.
Contact Bravo, let them know we have the bridge.
Roger that. You kick in a door at 4 o'clock in the morning and people are sitting there. Their biggest thing is trying to stay awake and not, steer this 800-foot ship around in circles. And then all of a sudden there's a bunch of really big guys with guns in your face. They just kind of sit there and go, what? That's the value of surprise. In a perfect world, that's the way it happens every time.
Violence of action is leading there to be no question of who's in charge and dictating who breathes and who doesn't breathe.
You don't allow somebody the luxury of having time to be able to react. It's over before they knew it even started.
The terrorists are subdued and the bridge is secure. Several decks below, Bravo team has simultaneously secured the engineering compartment, the result of complete tactical precision.
When we secure areas simultaneously, it is so important to be precise because time, seconds, can mean lives.
Engine room secure. Roger that. Hey, get these 2 down to containment and get a count. Get back up here. Bring it on the helos.
Even with the bridge and engineering under control, there's no telling how many more terrorists remain on board. 2 CH-46 Sea Knight choppers are mobilized from the nearby naval ship to fast rope in 2 more teams of reinforcements. Each aircraft can carry up to 25 troops and is armed with 50 caliber machine guns.
Once you have a team on board, some people already in place to cover then the helos insert. That way they can come right in on top, and if anybody comes up and starts running around or trying to compromise that, you have people in position to deal with it.
Bang, bass rope comes out. I'm exposed. They've got my back. I'll hit the deck. I got to get out of the way. Now I've got to cover for my exposed brother.
But as reinforcements arrive, the task unit's worst fears are realized.
The initial shooting started when the helicopters came overboard. They were on the port side. They'd come down and started shooting up at the air at the helicopters.
Let me tell you something. If you hear someone firing, you're in a chopper, you want to get the out of that helicopter. You don't want to go down in the helicopter like so many soldiers have. Find yourself with the enemy in your sights, there's no hesitation. You must take them out. There's just not a second thought.
They were taken care of very quickly.
With chaos spreading throughout the ship, the task force makes an alarming discovery.
We found out at that point that there was a number more people on there than we thought there might be. There was about double, over 20. The problem is you don't want to be comparable size. When it's a gunfight, if you're in a fair gunfight, your tactics suck.
Anytime you're in a firefight, there's just an inherent chaos to it. There's lives at stake, there's lead flying, there's screaming, there's shouting, there's agony, there's pain. When you come under fire, that is the point when your greatest weapon is ultimately tested, your training.
Pop time.
At that point, once the initial contact was made, then everybody went into loud mode and started storming.
While the task unit engages the enemy, it quickly becomes clear the terrorists are well armed as the tanker turns into a war zone.
They seemed like they had planned on possibly having to fight off somebody because they had a lot of AK-47s and some pistols and some grenades and some RPGs.
As the hijacked LNG tanker with the power to flatten a city heads toward Boston Harbor, the task unit sent to retake the ship remains locked in a deadly struggle for control.
Once the helos were overhead, I'm pretty sure they had figured out that something was going on, and that was when things started to break loose. A lot of times people underestimate the enemy just because they're, ragtag. These guys are motivated. They want to win. There was some skirmishes in the interior of the ship. It got very ugly very quickly.
The unit must be ready for anything as they attempt to stabilize the rest of the tanker.
You two stay here. You come with me.
You kind of go into a overdrive gear where it's just right on the training. Bang, bang, bang. What are we going to do? What are we going to run into? What's on the other side of the fence? Boat, room, door.
You know, that was when people started boiling out of places, running around trying to figure out what was going on. Ideally, the perfect thing would have been for everybody to wake up with a gun in their face. It didn't work out that way.
And as firefights erupt, casualties on both sides are imminent.
In a situation where your team member goes down, there's absolutely no question of what your response is going to be, or whether you're going to help him or not. We leave no man behind.
While the battle rages on deck, the team below must prevent the terrorists from turning their failing attack into a suicide mission by trying to ignite the liquefied natural gas and blow up the ship.
The other biggest thing we wanted to do was make sure that nobody could get to anything where they would be able to control the cargo. Start off-gassing, start throwing grenades or shooting RPGs at tanks or anything like that. They realized the game was up, and unfortunately they hadn't been able to enact their plan to get the explosives on, so they're trying their very best to take as many of us with them as they can.
Let's go for the tanks!
The decision to leave a team member behind, few and far between. But if there was a greater danger to the whole unit, as opposed to the one man down, probably be the only time you do something like that. But in the back of your mind, you know I'm coming back to help my bro.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. الله أكبر.
In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a task unit struggles to retake an LNG tanker from terrorists who plan to destroy Boston Harbor. As they battle for control, the unit must prevent the terrorists from turning their attack into a suicide mission.
They realized the game was up, so they're trying their very best to take as many of us with them as they can. So they started shooting at the tanks to try and get an explosion or a fire to take us out with them.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. الله أكبر.
It didn't work, but it was pretty obvious what they were trying to do. We were just lucky, I guess.
All told, the operation takes just 20 minutes. With the tanker secure, the task force begins to sweep the ship for any remaining terrorists and assess their own casualties.
There were some injuries. It's about as far as I'm going to go with that. But it's just part of the job. It's just part of taking care of business. This isn't a Sunday sewing club. You get knocks and you get dings. That's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. The original crew was still on board. They were locked up, and actually they pretty much had no idea of what happened and what transpired or anything. They were all just kind of kept sequestered. The folks that were still standing and who were taken into custody were just secured until follow-on forces who deal with them arrived, and they took over that aspect of it.
And as the captured terrorists are brought together, the questioning begins immediately.
We think we've got pretty much everybody under control. Then you go back and you do a fine comb search to make sure there's not somebody hiding in a bilge, with a pound of Simtex to blow a hole in the ship and sink it, or, wait a few hours and come out and throw a grenade at somebody.
And that search uncovers a terrifying discovery.
Like literally a boatload of Simtex?
Semtex is roughly equivalent to American-developed C4, which was used to blow a 35 by 36-foot hole in the USS Cole in 2000. That attack killed 17 U.S. sailors.
Their plan was to breach all of the vessels containing the cargo simultaneously to get as much of it out and dispersing, and then try and get a detonation. I'm not a physicist. I don't know if any of that stuff would have worked, if their plan would have worked, but that's not our job. Our job is to just, this is what needs to happen and get it done, and hopefully everybody goes home.
Could a terrorist plan like this work? Government reports can't predict the full potential of an LNG attack because experiments on that scale are considered impossible.
We don't have experiments of that size, and I don't think we're going to have any of those things. Now, if the question is, will it ever happen? That's a question for God, not a man.
But you do have to consider the worst case consequences. Nobody knows that. Nobody declares that they know what that is.
And the worst case scenario is only going to become more likely. While there are currently 5 LNG terminals operating in the United States, there are more than 40 proposed terminals in various stages of development.
So we're going to have more and more tankers, and there'll be more and more import terminals. Potential for an accident or a terrorist attack is bound to increase with the number of these terminals.
And many feel that a disaster like this could easily be prevented.
I can tell you pretty confidently that I don't believe that facility would be built here in the city today. So, I would say today, you're going to build a facility, you have the capability of building it offshore, away from populated areas. I'd have to say that, that'd be the way to go.
The U.S. Coast Guard continues to protect LNG tankers that come into Boston Harbor. But according to Government Accountability Office reports, even the Coast Guard realizes that line of defense will eventually come under strain.
There are some issues with this. Doing it every single time becomes routine. It becomes something that can be studied, that terrorists could do reconnaissance of. Every single time, the security has to be in place, and it has to succeed day in and day out. Terrorists only need to succeed once.
And for those events that require a special response, there is one group that is ready to answer the call.
As the world changes, administrations change, battlefronts change, warfare changes. One thing that won't change is our special forces. They will always be there.
In 1993, terrorists tried and failed to destroy the World Trade Center. 8 years later, this unheeded warning became reality on September 11th, 2001. This proves terrorists won't stop at one failed attack, and the LNG target still